Hey guys, what's up? Welcome to my studio tour. I finally got my Wi-Fi situation figured out in here, so I can do a live. I've wanted to for a while. I think I tried right when we moved in, but anyways, yeah, I finally got it to work. So you can leave questions if you want. Otherwise, I'm just gonna start answering some of the questions I got on my stories, and we can start from there. So yeah, here's the studio. I have you guys kind of propped up precariously at the moment. But yeah, it's a little shed I had built basically. You're in my backyard. Let me see if I can like flip y'all around. But yeah, so this is my backyard. And some of you might know I had a baby this summer, so we had to reconfigure the layout of the house. And we basically had this 12 by 12 backyard studio built. And I love it. It's a space where I can't hear kids. And so it's awesome for that. But here, I'll start out with a studio tour, like a literal studio tour. So I have this nice, let's see, it's like a double, not glass, it's like plexiglass or something, but basically this double wide door, which lets in a ton of light. I think it's east facing or something like that. My lights, which I have propped up at the moment, a little bit of storage. It's still a bit of a work in progress. I don't actually have floors. I mean, I do, but they're just like wood, plexi wood, whatever. But I have my, let's see, this is where I keep all my wood panels right here. It's actually, believe it or not, the inventory is super low. I just placed an order a couple days ago. But yeah, I have my toolbox down there, one of my old drop cloths. I have some of you guys ask, like, what do you do with your drop cloths? Basically, I save them and I repurpose them. So I paint, I had a couple people ask what I paint with, and it's acrylics, the golden Liquitex. And it's plastic, so it doesn't have the best footprint. And so what I try to do to save, to not like flush plastic down the sink or whatever, throw it away, is I try to get all of my paint out on my brush on my drop cloth, and then I save it, and it's this really yummy texture. I wish you guys could like feel it, but it's really thick, and obviously it's like beautiful in its own way. And so I use that. I made like shirts with it. I want to make tote bags with it, but basically I just keep it and I try to repurpose it and reuse it and resell it and do something with it instead of just throwing it away. But anyways, yeah, that's my little drop cloth. Obviously, as an artist, a toolbox is super handy. Let's see, my paint wall. This is my most like Pinteresty corner. But this is actually great. Not only does it like look great, and we all love like a good aesthetic, but it helps me not to keep buying the same paint over and over. Like, I remember I fell into this trap of like just buying nothing but quinacridone magenta and like never getting phthalo blue, and I'm like, what's wrong with my brain? So now I can see what I have and I know my inventory, and yeah, so it's great. I also have my color wheel, which I love, and I suggest to anyone to have one up. I know it seems really like elementary to have a color wheel in your studio, but it actually comes in more handy than you'd know. So I have all my brushes over here. Let me see if I can get a good shot of these guys. These are my larger acrylics. These are my go-to. I really ought to get more jars to put them in. But I get a lot of questions on my brushes, and I'm not much of a brush snob. Most of these are the Michaels Series 2. Wow, this one's crusty and busted, but Series 2 paintbrush. And they're super cheap. I think they're like anywhere between $4 and $20. So if you bought brushes before, you know that that's like a step above like craft brushes. But I love them. And then I have some nicer brushes for oils. I don't use oils a ton, but I found that with oils, the brushes matter a little more than they do with acrylics. The trick with brushes is just take care of them, wash them, lay them dry, and they'll last forever. Let's see, do you guys want me to go through what paints I have? A lot of these are repeats. Let's see, my go-tos are, I have phthalos, phthalo green, phthalo blue, and then as far as my other blues, I have Prussian blue that's like a really dark blue. Let's see, I have Jenkins greens, Hooker greens, phthalo greens. Yeah, I really ought to just one day like throw up a photo and let you guys look through it, but it's a lot of repeat colors. For the most part. I have a highlighted story where I go over every color in my palette, and it's a lot more detailed, so I'll link that later. But yeah, that's the paint wall in all its glory. I have a ruler. These things come in handy. I don't use a lot of straight edge, but you'd be surprised how nice it is to have one of these. Plus, I think they're like $1 at Home Depot. So, let's see what else. This rickety table. I'm only mentioning this table because it was the first thing I bought when I moved to Austin. I didn't even have my studio set up or anything, but it was like the little optimist in me that's like, one day I'll be a painter, even though I was in my like almost 2-year painting drought. But anyways, I love this little table. I bought it at Austin City thrift show or something like that for $10. So this is my wall that I do most of my painting on. I had a couple of people ask, like, is it just nailed up? What is that? Is that your drop cloth? Yes, this big white thing is my drop cloth. So I just showed you guys what my old drop cloth looks like. And this guy will get just as colorful and crunchy. But yeah, I just have it nailed into the wall. I don't have a plastic drop cloth underneath it because I did at all my other places because I had a deposit, but this is my own studio. I probably should put a plastic drop cloth underneath. I think I just like was too excited and I didn't put one underneath there, but I'll get there eventually. But yeah, it's just a king size sheet. I always, whenever I go into Target or Walmart, I'll just look for their clearance section, and every once in a while there'll be like a white or a cream colored king size sheet and I just grab them. So I have like a couple in the house. But anyways, yeah, that's what that is. It goes all the way from the ceiling to the floor. And then I just have nails in the wall. You can find like a stud finder if you'd like. And some people hang 2x4s. I just nail straight into my studs. And that's how I have that hung up. I also have an easel. Funny story, I didn't buy an easel until like halfway through this year. I don't think, other than in college, I've like never painted on an easel. But there was one on Craigslist for, I think it was like less than $100, and so I finally caved and bought one, and I actually love it because then I can work on multiple paintings kind of at once, which is really handy for me. So I love that. And then I have, let's see, this side of the studio is a little bit more of a work in progress, but I brought in a ton of my paintings, which I can go through later. A couple of disco balls that I've primed and gessoed, but have not started on. I've started on my little guys, but I'm doing a disco ball drop. Let's see, the beginning of December, so keep your eye out for that. And then here's just my big blank wall for now. I hang paintings that are works in progress up there, and then usually I just have a bunch of my blank canvases on that side of the wall. It's not too fancy. I have a couple of lights up there that are hooked up to solar. My goal with the studio is to, well, first of all, I need to put it in the floor, but eventually I'd like to have it all hooked up to solar. That's like my dream. I think I should be able to do it next spring or this upcoming spring, so fingers crossed. But yeah, and then I have a little air conditioner, which is an absolute must in Texas. But again, hopefully that's hooked up to solar pretty soon. And then we're back to the window. So that's your 360 tour of the whole studio. It's not huge, but it's perfect. You're sitting on a desk, which is where I do all of my smaller paintings. So anything like this size and under, I just sit and do that. And anything, let's see, 18 by 24 and larger usually goes on the easel, and then anything really jumbo just goes straight on the wall. So yeah, that's kind of where I paint. So now I guess I'll start flipping through some questions and get to some of those. So yeah, I feel like I'm like out of breath from just talking through that. Sorry if that was quick. Hey guys, what's up? Oh, you guys are so sweet. Yeah, acrylics mostly. Yeah, I would say like 95% of the time I use acrylics. I do play around with oils a little bit. I love oils, but they're just messy and I work pretty quick. And yeah, I just think acrylics really fit my style a little bit better, but oils are great. Let's see, frame the drop cloth. I actually do have, from an older drop cloth, I cut out little pieces and I sell those on my website. So if you're interested, there's drop cloths on there. Yeah, let's see. Oh, thanks for the hair. Yeah, I'll link the girl who does my hair if you're in Austin. She's amazing. Her name's Erin. She's awesome. Let's see. Color wheel on the wall. Yeah, you're never too good for a color wheel. And the reason I use one is because, so it's not that I don't have it memorized. Like obviously I think in kindergarten you usually sort of get the color wheel down. But the reason I really like it is because so let's say you're mixing some browns or neutrals and you're wanting to pull it one direction or the other. Sometimes being able to just kind of look up with an eye shot and know that, let's say my brown is too red, like how do I fix that? How do I not make it another color but just make it less red? Well, then all you have to do is look up and just go, oh yeah, it's green. And at this point, most of the time I have that, but sometimes when you're working, again, my style is very like, it always feels like a frenzy kind of, like in a good way. Sometimes just being able to look up and shoot your eye over there and be like, oh, it's green, is really helpful. So yeah, love a good color wheel. Do you use gouache? One time I played around with gouache, but I ended up donating the kit to one of my friends because I just really like acrylics for how they are. I felt like gouache sort of felt like I just couldn't master it. Like there's nothing wrong with it. I just had a hard time with it. And so I just figured I'd give it to someone who uses gouache. So I like acrylics a lot more. Do I have a painting course? Yes, I do. I have a course. It's called Not Sorry Art School. The link is in my bio. But yeah, basically right now I have a painting 101. So I went to a private liberal arts university. I had an amazing painting professor. I took 4 years of painting and fine arts, and it's basically everything I learned in those 4 years, plus my daily practice, sort of synthesized into one course, and I'm sort of adding on as you go. So the cool thing about the course is that once you buy in, you're just going to get more courses added to it, but you don't have to pay for anything else. You just buy in the one time, and then I keep adding courses. Like I added a Halloween demo. I'm working on a greenhouse painting right now, and then November 20th, I'm releasing a social media strategy package. It's going to be that little package is going to be for sale outside of it, but if you're already signed up for Not Sorry Art School, you just get it added to your desk. So it's a cool thing if you want to check it out, and I just keep adding information to it. So if you buy in at $300 or $400, then forever you'll just keep adding courses and you'll never have to pay extra. You just keep getting added to the deck. So yeah, I do. I love teaching over there. Let's see. Brushes dry before I clean them. Yeah, don't do that. It's don't let your brushes dry. So I use cheap brushes, and I feel like the key to having your brushes, to not having to spend a lot of money on nice brushes, is just taking really good care of them. One thing I do in addition to washing them and not letting them sit overnight, let them dry flat, and this brush shaper is pretty legit. I need to get some more of it, but it's just this stuff, and I just sort of shape. If I have a brush that, let's say I did let it sit for a little bit of time, I will sort of smooth it out and lay it flat, and it kind of revives it. I mean, eventually the brushes wear out to where the bristles start to fall out, but I've had mine for years, and it takes forever to get the bristles to like really fall out and unravel. Sorry. Hello. Hi, Austin. Yeah, I see a lot of people from Austin. I just ordered heavy body paints for the first time. Let's see, actually on your highlights, do you have any tips for beginners? Yeah, I would say like stick with a limited palette. Maybe Google some limited palette ideas. I just got done talking to my art school kids about like a warm palette versus a cool palette. But if you're investing in nice paints, maybe start a little bit smaller scale and kind of play around with that, because a tube of the 2-ounce paints goes really fast if you're painting anything over like 11 by 14 inch-ish. But yeah, good luck, and you can use mediums. You don't have to with those heavy body acrylic paints. You can just wet your brush down, and because they're so opaque, it doesn't thin them out a ton like it does with the basics paints or the lower end paints. And enjoy. Tell me how you like the really high quality paints. I feel like I've had people message me and say, oh, I bought the nicer paints because of you, and it's almost a different medium, and that's like a perfect way of talking about it. It is almost like a different medium. Favorite art supply store in Austin? I really like Jerry's and Michael's. Are kind of a toss-up. Michael's has some really good sales sometimes. Like I am pretty loyal to their canvases. I can make my own. I used to in college, but it's just a time saver, and occasionally they'll have them for like 77% off, and you can't beat that. It's a really good deal, even if you made your own. Let's see. Yeah, I will save this and post it later. Let's see. Yeah, thanks. Oh yeah, I don't know where. I think I got Urban Outfitters or something like that. But motivates me when I'm painting. Gosh, I don't know. I think I'm always just excited to see how the painting will turn out. For the most part, it's fun to see it unfold. My style is realism-esque, so it's I'm using a reference photo for the most part, and I'm really trying to create a certain amount of realism, but because there's photography and I don't need to have it be, picture perfect. I really like what happens when you're aiming for realism and you sort of fall short, and like where that kind of ends up. That's like my favorite thing to play around with, and really exploring what you can do with paint while hanging on to realism. I think that's just a really fun dynamic to play with. And so I think seeing where I land is kind of what's motivating to me. And then also just getting better and getting more confident in my work has been really exciting. If you don't know, I have a daily practice. I started January 1st, 2016. So I'm almost to 5 years, which is crazy. And in those 5 years, just being able to see myself grow, I have, because you guys are seeing me so kind of late in this, daily painting practice thing, you guys see someone who's really, sure in their artwork and they're, confident, and like I'm fairly good at what I do. But I just want to remind you, like I had a skill set, but it's all about practice and how much practice can make you better. And I know when I've posted, portraits recently, people are like, wow, you're improving. It's fun to see you improve. And I always want to tell you guys, like, nobody is born out of the womb with like a paintbrush in their hand and like crazy good. I mean, there's some exceptions in the world, but for the most part, all of us are just, we're time and practice plus effort, and then that's where we go. And so being able to just see myself get better has been really motivating too. So yeah, that's what motivates me. It's a Not Sorry Art School. It's through Teachable and not Patreon. No, it's its own, it's like a full teaching website, and it's set up like that. There's also Not Sorry Art School Facebook group that you can be part of once you buy the course, and I have like office hours every Sunday. So every Sunday I go through and answer questions, and that's been really fun. So it's interactive. You not only get the class, but you have like a critique component if you want to have that. And the critiques are really sensitive. Like you can say, I want to critique on this and not on this. It's very like permission based. So if you've gone to art school and the word critique kind of scares you, like I understand, but it's very like you only get a critique if you're asking for it, and you can ask for specific kinds of critique. So it's very consensual in that way. Hi Ohio. Oh, I love that. It's so neat when I see people from all over. Let's see, weekly goals on how many paintings you finish or what accountability. My only accountability is that I get in something daily. There's been a few exceptions, like I've had a baby somewhat recently, and so I've let myself have some more kind of days off, but for the most part, it's not about output, it's not about product, it's about time spent in my studio. So I'm really good about getting myself out here, and even if all I do is sort of like work backwards on a painting or like just undo something, and I just paint edges and clean up my studio, that's a success for me, even if I didn't put out something that's finished. So sometimes if you see a week where I do a lot of throwbacks, I'm probably having some paintings that are like turning into big garbage fires. So, I don't have product goals. I just have time goals. So, a good week for me is I got 2 hours every day in the studio, and most of those days were successful. So I really try to, I think that's why I had such a bad artist block, is because in college, there is an output goal. It has to be, because that's how you grade and critique. And, as a college student, you wouldn't get as much done if you didn't have it that way. So like, I respect that. But when I graduated and I was on my own time, I sort of had that similar output anxiety. Like, oh, I have to make something finished, and, it has to look really good. And I just didn't have the support of the studio. I had gotten rusty because I had taken some time off. And so, it was really just a bad mindset to be in. And so when I told myself one painting a day, it's only going to be like, and the paintings were awful, but it's just about spending that time making something every day and posting it anyways. I think that helped me get over that fear of like putting out something that wasn't perfect. There is no perfect. Even my best paintings, I'm always like, oh, that's kind of weird. But I think just making myself put out stuff anyways and making a daily practice is how I'm able to be so prolific. It isn't because like being prolific is like the byproduct from giving myself permission to just go in my studio and not worry about what I make. Does that make sense? So that's what I'm trying to say. How big was your biggest art piece? So the 48 by 60 is like the biggest size I have done recently. But in college I did one that was probably like double that size, but more horizontal. And that was really big. So it was huge. It was like wall size. It was of like an older Midwestern looking church. It was really cool. I'll have to like repost it. Yes, let's see. Your paints look, yeah, heavy body acrylic paints are very opaque, and that's why they're so great. Let's see. I prime and do a lot of stuff with this kind. So this is like Liquitex Basics, and also this. And so when I see you guys say like, oh, I don't like acrylics, I have a hard time, you're either painting, from what I've seen, and this isn't always the case, obviously, but from what I've seen, you guys a lot of times are painting with these kinds of paints, or like the craft paints. And if those aren't inherently bad, but if you're trying to paint in a style that's similar to mine, this will be very hard to do that with, because there's a lot more medium to pigment ratio, and with the higher end paints, you're paying for a lot more pigment versus medium. So it almost feels like a different medium. It really is. It's a lot more opaque, and you can do a lot more coverage with it. And yeah, so it's just different. And for what I do, I consider that paint better. I think everything else you can kind of cheap out on. Like I even do a lot of work on paper. And obviously my brushes are super rough, but the paints are kind of the like most important part. So yeah. How do you decide on what you'll paint on each piece on? Yeah, so there is like kind of a roughly like logic to it, but there's not. It kind of just depends on the day. It depends on the size. So the small ones on wood, I first started painting on those because I was painting on little canvases, and they kept getting like broken in the mail. And so I started painting on wood just thinking, okay, maybe it won't get broken. But I found that because wood has like less of a grain to it, you can see there's almost like a gloss to it. The paint doesn't get absorbed nearly as bad as not bad, but as much as canvas. And so for me, getting the details was a lot easier to do on the wood panels. So because of that, my panels tend to be smaller. The stuff I do on canvas tends to be paper. And then the really like experimental stuff, or if I just run out of canvases, is on paper. That's kind of loosely the logic to it. But yeah, I just sort of, whatever I feel like. How many hours in a day do you paint? Well, now that I've had the baby, my bare minimum is 1 hour a day, and when she's going through a growth spurt or when life is just hectic, it's 1 hour a day. But if we're having a good day, like my goal, like my perfect is always about 5 hours a day, like 2.5 to 3 hours in the morning, and then 1 hour later in the day. That's my sweet spot, unless I'm like really prepping for like a show or I have deadlines. 5 hours tends to be my like max for like creative energy, and then I start to like undo all my paintings if I try to push much further than that. So if I have more time, then I'll like do something more like clerical with my business. But yeah, for the most part, 5 hours is like a dream painting day. But yeah, right now it's closer to 2. So Idaho, hey, what's up? Let's see, trying to create for A levels. Oh, cool. Yeah. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to say this and then get like a flood and not be able to do them all, but I try to answer a lot of like students, if you're working on like a senior thesis or something, or A levels, like, DM me, and I've probably done 5 or 6 phone calls in the last couple of months with people just talking art and answering art questions. So shoot your shot. From Israel. Hi. Let's see. Do you take social media breaks? Kind of. Sometimes I'll make a bunch of content. Like if I have a bunch of paintings I can post throughout the week, I will try to take a little bit of a social media break. It's just not super possible with like my job and the fact that I don't have a big team. My husband helps some, and I have someone who helps a little bit with the Not Sorry Art School, but it's kind of just me. So not yet, but that's like the dream. So one day I'll get there. This definitely like isn't tenable forever, but I've also taken a step back recently, and so that's kind of been like a break. But yeah, I definitely could use a detox for sure. Let's see, difficult getting your store set up, like getting prints together. That's the thing I struggle with most. Yeah, I've just done it in small pieces. I think the reason I've been able to get to where I am is because I've let things be kind of imperfect. I first started out with an Etsy site, and then I moved to a Squarespace when I was familiar enough with the shipping and the Etsy and everything that I was like, okay, I can do this. I shifted over to Squarespace. I think I had like the most basic level e-commerce kind of setup, and I just sold my originals, and that was as simple as that. And then when that got routine and I was able to do that well, then I started thinking about prints. I did prints through a shop in town, and I sort of had to, do it that way. And then whenever I was able to save up enough money from the prints that I bought from the print shop in town, I was able to invest that into a printer, and now I sell prints for myself. So it's all been like little steps. Unless you are just sitting on like a wad of cash, I definitely suggest doing it that way. That way you don't get over your head, and you feel guilty because you're like, I invested in this printer, or I took out credit for this printer and I'm not selling anything. Get to where what you're doing feels like, the analogy I'm thinking of is like moving from a small seashell to a bigger seashell to a bigger one. That's like basically how I've done my whole art career. But yeah, start small, start with your originals, maybe do some pieces on paper. Or if you like prints more, maybe it takes you a long time to do a painting. Start by buying, 10 of something that you think will sell the best of, and see how that goes for you. And really just gather data during the whole time. Really keep track of how much you're selling and what you're selling a lot of. And yeah, good luck. It's tough, but you can definitely do it. If I can do it, you can do it, I promise. Let's see. What artistic training? Yes, I went to a 4-year private liberal arts university, so that just means it wasn't like an art school. I just majored in graphic design and fine arts, so I took a lot of other classes too. Like I took like a math, a science, and then a bunch of like philosophy and English and writing type classes. But there's nothing wrong with self-taught. People always don't let that be like, because I've had training, like that's the only way to get ahead. I vehemently disagree with that. I know a lot of people who are self-taught who are as successful, if not more successful than me on this app, and both in a gallery setting. The idea of being self-taught is totally different than it was even like 10, 15 years ago, because there is so much more access to knowledge. There's YouTube, I'm always giving out even just free information. I have my art school. Somebody one time messaged me and they said that they call it community taught, and I love that. Isn't that the best phrase, community taught art? And that's just the idea that you're always sort of learning and growing from people in your community. So whether it's like actual workshops you're taking or tips from people online, but all of that goes into your ability. And basically, if you're a creative person, you can be creative in how you gain and acquire new artistic knowledge. And so I did go to art school because I had a running scholarship, and that was just the easiest thing for me to do at the time. But you definitely don't need to have a formal education to make art. I'm actually very passionate about that. There's an analogy a little anecdote that a painting professor sat down with a little girl or little kid, and she was like, well, what do you do for a living? And he's like, oh, I teach older adults basically, or teenagers or whatever, college age kids, to paint. And she was like, oh, people forget how to paint. And I sort of love that idea, because it's we already have that. I have a 5-year-old, like he just draws and creates all day long without prompting, without being like, hey, it's art time. Like he just is always making stuff. And so don't ever forget that your creativity is your own, and you don't need to buy it back from an institution. You are creative. You can figure out how to do art. Don't count yourself out. Don't think that because you're not formally educated that you're not allowed to make art and participate. So anyways, yeah, my little soapbox, I'll hop off of it. But yeah, let's see. Oh, hi Brazil. That's so cool. I really want to, when all this is over, go to South America really, really bad, in Mexico. And anyways, but hi y'all. Let's see. Favorite color? I don't know. Right now I'm really digging oranges, which is crazy because I used to hate orange. But yeah, peach, orange right now. This green color is pretty rad. I'm kind of into it. But it always comes and goes, different colors. Recommend to start painting on a really big canvas. Oh yeah, so painting large scale. Yeah, so the biggest advice I can give you if you're painting large is that you're going to need to do a little bit more planning than if you do small. Like my small paintings, I always sort of treat them as like almost like learning or experiment or play. And obviously big canvases, it can still be that too, but they just require a little bit of planning ahead. So one thing you can do is make like a mini painting of your bigger painting to kind of work out some kinks. I definitely suggest that. I do that every time I have a commission that's large, and then sometimes with my own just personal stuff. But the other advice I can give you, the reason why I have this lower quality paint is for my bigger canvases. What I do with this is I will take a big piece of glass that I mix my paints on and just glob out a bunch of these like I would my little palette, my little Stay Wet palette, and I just paint my first layer with this. So I'll go in and draw with like, you know, a color like a phthalo blue and white mixed together, and use some medium to thin it out, and then I'll draw, and I'm really informal with this first draw. And then I go in with the acrylic paints, and is the pigment amazing? No, it's usually kind of see-through. But what it does is two things. One, it sort of knocks in the values so that now like you've covered your painting and you already have like your general shapes and values blocked in. It makes it like less intimidating, but then practically you kind of have some information to work from. And then also, because this is such a plasticky, there's so much medium in there, it sort of fills in the gaps in your canvas, and your paint, your expensive paints that are gonna go on top, don't soak in and they don't get wasted as fast. So I started doing that back when I was like super on a budget. Like everything I sold pretty much went right back into paints. Yeah, and it was great. This stuff is like, you know, $4 a bottle, and you know, the really nice paints over on this wall are like up to $30. So it's a tip that I use to save paints. And then the last thing I'll say to you is make sure you start in with bigger brushes. I know that seems really obvious, but if you start small, not only is it going to feel overwhelming, it's going to take forever, and you sometimes get sucked into details way before you should. Remember, your first layer is just bigger ideas, bigger values, and then you slowly get smaller. So anyways, I hope that was helpful. I need to do a whole video on painting large. So anyways, yeah. What kind of art do I think people like to buy? Man, I don't know. I'm always like perplexed by what sells and what doesn't. So you tell me. I don't know. How long did it take to sell your first piece of art? Let's see. I don't know. I think I made art without selling it or even trying to for like 6 months. And then when I got an Etsy shop set up, I pretty quickly sold some stuff, but I also had them priced really low. Like my little watercolor like doodles essentially were, I don't know, 8 by 10-ish, 9 by 12, and I sold them for like $10. So they went quick because they weren't very much money. You know, I just, yeah, they sold them quick, but they were $10. So take that as, you know, whatever you want to take that as. Let's see, do you have a way to confidently tell a client the price of a piece without feeling bad? I always stress out about how to say the price without seeming pretentious. Be confident in your pricing. If you've made a price, you've thought about this a lot, right? The client probably hasn't thought about it as much as you have because you are thinking about your work. So you know how much time goes into it. You know how much paints are. I think people are always shocked when I tell them like the paints are like anywhere between $11 and $35 a tube. And you know that though, and you know how much labor went into it. And if you have student loans you're paying on top of that for your education, be confident in your pricing, and know that if you're honest with your pricing, the right buyer will come along. And just sort of be, just have boundaries. Just be like, this is this much because this piece of art is this good. And if they think you're pretentious, that's kind of not your problem. I mean that in the most respectful way. If they want to barter and they're like, and they say something that's reasonable, or they want to do payments or something, be open to that. I always am open to taking payments and stuff with people. But I would be careful because, sometimes people, when they don't understand what goes into a painting, they're pretty quick to be like, oh, that's too much. Or weirdly, family and friends, I've noticed, who aren't familiar and they know you will like try to get you to buy something or buy something from you, and you're like, oh, it's $200, and they don't know that hours and hours went into it, how much paint costs, and they're like, oh, that's ridiculous. Stay true in your pricing. If you know you price something correctly, stay true to that. And then the other side, because of course it's easy to say that, but then you're like, well, then it won't sell. Be open to making either prints of things or like making smaller series of things, and just say, okay, well, if that's, too much money, that's fine. I respect you. Here's this smaller body of work or this work on paper. Would that interest you? Just don't take it personally. That's just a big life mantra that I have in general. Don't take things personally. But especially with pricing, and especially if you price something well, just stick to your guns. Be receptive, but yeah, if you know your prices, then you know your prices. Let's see, how much style is conscious decision or just natural painting process and abilities? That's $1 million question. Yeah, I think it depends. For me, I guess I can only speak to myself personally. A lot of my style is my influences, so people that I admire, and I'm interested in their work, and I study their work, and then my own attempt at realism, and then how I'm falling short. I think the funny thing about style, at least for me, when I get these questions like, how do you develop a style? A lot of my style is just my flaws. It's my inability to be more muted or to like really bracket my values. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. Sort of, a lot of my style is just sort of saying, this is how I naturally paint and I'm okay with these things and I want to fix these things. And that's kind of where I feel like my style comes from. I'm really interested in accuracy, but only accuracy in certain aspects. Like obviously my color accuracy isn't like, I'm not super accurate with my color, but if I can make the values and the drawing really, really accurate, it sort of transports you into this world where maybe those colors could exist because I'm so good at telling the rest of the story and making the rest of what I'm saying really accurate, that the colors sort of are like, okay, maybe I don't believe that ocean wave is bright pink, but the rest of it kind of works, so I'm going to go with you, taking people on this journey. So your style, I think you can come up with sort of a style and a goal, but ultimately it's going to be the way your practice is set up is going to be how your style presents itself. And know that if you're at somewhere where you don't like your style, you just have to keep plugging into it. I've only felt like even in the last year or two that I've gotten to a place where I'm really into my style. I was like, oh, thanks, it's brushy because I'm not super accurate right now, but just be okay with that and sort of learn to appreciate your quirks, and that's going to inform your style, and learn where you want to change those quirks and where you want to get better and maybe you don't enjoy that, and then where you're sort of okay with the way you naturally do things and sort of balance that. And I think that's where style comes from. I don't know, is that helpful? Let's see, how do you start to sell on Canvas? Find your audience, and that's so much easier said than done. That's part of why I'm coming up with a course, is because telling people how to market their art is really hard to do. And social media advice that's out there a lot of times doesn't really work with artists. And so that's why this course that I'm coming up with is very much like how artists sell work. How do you stay true to your style and your practice, and then also market that? The little bit of advice I can give you from the workshop is sort of to separate the part of you that makes art from the marketing part of yourself. So try not to go to your easel or your desk when you make art thinking about, how am I going to sell this? Try to keep that thought out of your mind and instead go and authentically make art and make what's exciting for you. And then later, when you're done and you've cooled off, then figure out how you can market that. If you're authentic, that's going to show through your work and you're going to attract the right people. It may not be a huge audience, but you only need an authentic connection with people to sell work. You don't need millions of followers. You're not selling, coasters or, cool cups, or, you're not selling like a product. You're selling an art, piece of art, which is a story. It's a lot more authentic. So you don't need, tons and tons of people. You just need people who are interested in your work and to be really authentic to that. And that's how you're going to start selling. And obviously that's a small part of it, but that's a little nugget of advice, I guess. Let's see. I'm close to finishing my last year of college. Do you have any tips on what to do before graduation, like reaching out to companies, galleries, etc.? Yeah, I suggest to students in college, if you have the time and space, and obviously college is a very demanding part of your life, or it can be. I had a job and I was a student athlete, so this wouldn't have been possible for me. But if you do have the space, I would suggest try to start selling right now. I'll get to your suggestions in a second, but if you're in college right now, try to set up a Shopify app and plug it into your Instagram, or sell directly through Instagram. Just start getting into the practice of selling, because unless you're also majoring in like business or entrepreneurship, likely those skills aren't going to be taught to you in an art school setting. So being able to market your work, to package and sell, to communicate with potential buyers, all of those things are going to be real life skills that are going to carry you all the way through your art career. So if you can start doing that now, even if you're only selling 1 or 2 things a semester, that's still practice. That's still going to be helpful to you in the future. It's like getting a business degree like in real time. So that's like my biggest piece of advice. Just because you're a student, like there's so many students on here on Instagram who are making amazing work. And so likely if you're in college, you're still making pretty good work. So be proud of it. Even if you don't have your diploma, it's just a piece of paper, and try to sell as you're going. The other thing, like reaching out to companies and galleries, you can always be reaching out. If you're on Instagram right now, so I'm assuming you're using Instagram. You can tag companies. You can reach out to galleries. The best thing to do to reach out to a gallery, don't just cold show up or, cold call. Email them and ask them, hi, I'm, looking into your gallery. What is the avenue that I need to go to get representation? And they will tell you who to email, how to email them, and kind of all that information, or link you to a page where it has all that stuff on it. Don't just show up with your work. Galleries hate that. So yeah, feel free, start now. Yeah, go for it. Just reach out to whoever and shoot your shot. So let's see. What kind of art do people like to buy? Yeah, that's a really hard question. Typically people like stuff that they can hang in their house, I guess, but I always think of it like, instead of trying to mass appeal, I really think you have to work from the other way around. So instead of thinking, how can I make something that people want to buy? I find that you're gonna make the best work if you're making what you really love and then finding that authentic audience. So try not to think about, it's like what I said earlier, don't sit down in your chair or at your easel thinking, how am I gonna sell this? Think about what gives you the most excitement to paint, what feels the most authentic, what you really need to get off your chest, and then worry about finding your audience after the fact. So I hope that's helpful. That's, at least for me, that's been really freeing in my practice. So I'm gonna start to wrap up, but let's see. Yeah, I got a couple questions about digital art. I think it's great. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I'm always dubious of hierarchies within art, like something's better than something else. I think people express themselves however they're gonna express themselves, and I think there's, if digital art is how you best, get your ideas out there, then I don't see anything wrong with it. I don't think painting's better because it's an older medium. That makes no sense. I remember, Warhol got a lot of criticism for painting in acrylics because oils were the norm or whatever. All that stuff is kind of, I don't know, arbitrary. But yeah, digital art's great. There's a lot of use for it. A lot of, because so much of our content is digital right now anyways, I feel like especially if you're wanting to make digital art for a company, I think that's kind of the best way to go, is to do illustration through digital platforms like Procreate or whatever and try to sell that way. I actually think in some ways painting has a bit of a disadvantage. So yeah, I think it's great. I have nothing against any kind of art style. If it's authentic, then I'm not gonna knock it. So let's see, as the average amount of time you spend on a piece I intend to sell, that really varies. Anywhere from, if I do a little guy, I can knock it out in something really simple, like 10 minutes. But generally my small ones, if it's not a portrait, will take me an hour. If it is a portrait, 2 to 4 hours. And then something like that size, for instance, can take me months. So it really depends. But I will say that for 2 years, so for 2016 and 2017, I did one painting a day, and my average canvas size was 16 by 20 or 18 by 24. And I did that in kind of one day. So one day of 2 hours in the morning and then 1 or 2 hours at night. So that's my go-to rhythm. But my style is very quick and brushy. Do you decorate your house with your own paintings? Yes, I do. I eventually would like to have all other people's art in there. But yeah, I kind of was weird about that too, because I had heard somewhere that I don't know, that it was not narcissistic, but you shouldn't hang up your own painting, or you think too high of yourself. But then my husband started hanging up my paintings on the wall, I think literally just to get them out of the way, because at the time we were living in a tiny apartment. But I actually really liked it. I thought it was cool. It was nice to see it in the context of not my painting wall, or not just on a little phone. And I really appreciate it. It's given me some time to really look at my paintings and see what I like about it, and finding passages that really speak to me. But yeah, I would like to eventually, just for the sake of supporting other artists, fill my house with other people's art. But it's really expensive if you're going to pay people their worth. So I'm slowly getting there. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, if it feels good to hang your own paintings on your wall, then go for it. What do I think about the new IG update? I think they're a business trying to be a business. You have to remember that Instagram is mining people's attention. It's not made for the creators. It's made for the people using the app passively, viewers. So, I don't knock them. They're a business. I knew what I was signing up for when I started throwing my art on there. But I would say make sure you try to get people's email address, and try to make sure you diversify into different social media. So try to do, if you like TikTok, that, YouTube, Pinterest, but try to diversify where your audience is. because you don't want to have one platform kind of have all of your be your only source of income. And that's what I've been trying to do the last year or so anyways. But yeah, I mean, personally, I don't love it, but you know, it's irrelevant. So yeah, it's a business. Let's see, I'll get to my last couple. Let's see. Oh yeah, why do I paint on orange? Okay, yes, it's a good question because I get it asked a lot. Basically, I try to prime with a medium value. So think of the value scale, 1 being bright white and 10 being, you know, pitch black. Somewhere in the middle, that's just a good place to start. That's what we did in college. We did gray. And the reason is because if you blow out your values, if you start on a stark white canvas, it's really hard to nail values unless you cover the whole thing and then kind of start from there. So if you start with a medium background, you kind of already have a leg up. And the reason I like orange is because I like warm colors. I like the way it pops through. It's sort of a personal thing. A lot of people do it on Instagram, and I think people think like, oh, what's this orange canvas conspiracy? But it's nothing. It's most people just like to start with a medium tone, and orange seems to be kind of the in color. So yeah, so that's helpful. But start with whatever you want to start on. Let's see. I'll get to my last question. Let's see. Sorry, good advice. Yeah, thank you guys so much. How do I get bright colors? Okay, so my last question. So the way I get really saturated colors, it's twofold. One is I use sort of a limited palette. So I only have, you know, 1 or 2 of all the primaries and then maybe 1 of the secondary colors. And even then, not always secondary colors. And something about using a limited palette kind of keeps your colors pure and you sort of are more familiar with what you're working with. The other thing is if you want to get really good at mixing bright saturated colors, my advice is actually kind of inverse. It's mix your own neutrals and browns and grays and beiges, because if you know how to get to those more unsaturated colors, the more dull colors, then you'll know how to stay away from making those colors when you want to go bright. So try doing a limited palette. Try, if you notice that you mix a lot of grays and browns, maybe try to not put any browns on your palette and see what that looks like, because it's going to force you to mix those browns, and then you'll know, you know, that phthalo blue green with any kind of a red or orange is going to pull down the saturation really quick because of those green undertones, and it's just going to help you be more familiar with your palette. So the way I'm able to mix really bright is because I know exactly what to stay away from, because I'm so familiar with mixing my own neutrals. So I hope that was helpful. Okay, well, I'm going to hop off now. That was really fun, really good questions. I am going to save this. So yeah, thank you guys so much. I hope to do more studio tours and more stuff out here now that I have the Wi-Fi figured out. So thanks again, and I hope you guys have a great rest of your Sunday. Thanks.